Hello everyone and welcome to a new video of your Polyglot Academy. Today it's lesson 30 and we're going to talk about the past participle and we're going to discuss about how to form every possible case. So let's go. Now the first possibility we have is if we're talking about regular verbs, and here's an example. Machen is a regular verb, and in order to conjugate the past participle of machen, you're simply going to add ge at the beginning of the sentence, so at the beginning of the verb in this case, and we're going to substitute the last part of the verb with en with a t. So here you can see how we're doing it for machen. Machen is going to become gemacht because we're adding ge at the beginning of the verb and we're substituting the en part with a t. So machen is going to become gemacht. So it's pretty straightforward, right? Here you can see a second example. Spielen is going to become gespielt because we're adding a g and a e at the beginning of the verb and we're substituting en with a t. Now the second possibility is if we're talking about verbs which are going to end with a t or d. You can see an example. We have arbeiten, and you can see that the root of arbeiten is going to end with a t. And if we would conjugate the past simple of arbeiten as we would have done it for normal verb, then it would be kind of difficult because we would add g and e at the beginning, and then we would add a t instead of en. But then if we would try to pronounce it, it would be gearbeitete, and it wouldn't be that comfortable. So in German, we're kind of putting an e between the last letter of the root, so in this case the t of arbeiten, arbeite, and the t we're adding while substituting en with a t. So we're going to put an e right in the between. So the past participle of arbeiten is going to become gearbeitet. Here you can see a second example. If we consider the verb baden, which is also going to end with d, the root of baden is going to end with a d, then we're simply going to add an e right between the d and the t we would normally substitute. So in this case, the past participle of baden is going to become gebadet. Now, the third possibility is if we're going to talk about verbs which end with ieren, so studieren, informieren, kommunizieren, etc. And it is very important to know about these verbs because in order to conjugate the past participle, you do not need to add ge at the beginning of the sentence. You're simply going to replace the part with en at the end with a t. So you're basically simply doing the second part of what we're doing while conjugating the past participle. The part with en is simply going to become a t. So the past participle of studieren is going to become studiert. If we consider informieren, for example, then we're simply going to substitute en with a t. So it's basically the same. Informieren becomes informiert. And that is always true for verbs that end with ieren. So that's also very important to remember. Now, the fourth possibility we have is if we're considering separable verbs. Now, we already talked about separable verbs, and we said that they're kind of made out of two components. We have the prefix, so in this case, zu, and the verb, machen. Now, in order to form the past participle of the separable verb, you would simply kind of build the past participle of the main verb. So in this case, the past participle of machen is going to be gemacht, and then you're simply letting the prefix at the beginning. So zu is simply going to stay at the same position, and then you are going to write the past participle of the verb in the middle. So you're simply first writing the prefix and then conjugating. If we consider another example with a separable verb, then in this case we have anzeigen, and we're simply going to let the prefix, so an, and then we're going to conjugate the main verb zeigen. So the past participle is going to become angezeigt. Case 5 is simply going to be very similar. Now we're talking about inseparable verbs, and we already talked about the fact that they're also kind of made out of a prefix and out of a verb, but the prefix is staying in the same position no matter what we're talking about. And in order to build the past participle, you're simply going to substitute the en part of the end with a t. So it is very similar to what we did for case 3 for verbs that end with ieren. You're simply substituting the part of the end. So the past participle of zerstören is going to be zerstört. And here from this table, you can see all regular cases listed. So for regular verbs or for regular verbs which end in T or D, or for verbs which end in ieren, separable verbs, inseparable verbs, etc. So please write this table out, and it's going to be very important to remember it. Now, before we come into the last case we're talking about today, firstly, I'm going to show you some exercises. Now, you can see 10 verbs, and please write the past participle, Partizip 2 in German, of the listed verbs. And if you would like the right solutions, just write me a comment and I will send you the right solutions of that. So please do the exercise because it's very important. I think past participles are the #1 mistake when it comes to people learning German, so it is also very important to remember that. Now, the last case we're talking about today is if we're considering irregular verbs now. Irregular verbs are kind of complicated and there are lots of possibilities, but if we're taking, for example, the verb kommen, then in order to build the past participle, you're simply going to add ge at the beginning, and the verb is simply going to stay like that. So the past participle of kommen is simply going to be gekommen. So you're not changing anything at the end. You're not substituting en with anything. Now, this is true for most cases, but sometimes you kind of have verbs like nehmen, and in order to build the past participle, you're kind of writing genommen. So you're adding ge, you're not substituting, but the root of the verb is changing. You have nehmen, and it's going to be nomme. So it is very important to learn these verbs by heart. This is fundamental. Now, here you can see a table with the most important irregular verbs. You can see the infinitive on the left side, the past participle of the verb, and the meaning of the verb now. So it is pretty important to know these verbs, and I would please you to write them down and or to stop the video now. I'm not gonna put some exercises on irregular verbs, but only these 5 sentences, and try to enter the past participle of the verbs in brackets. These are irregular verbs, but they are so fundamental, so please try to learn them and try to do the exercises. And if you went so far, thanks for watching. It was a very long video, but I hope you kind of understood the importance of learning these verbs. And if you have any questions, just write a comment, and I will see you next time. Have a nice day.